All right, peace, peace. I'm with y'all, man. I'm just waiting for get a couple more people up in here, then I'm gonna start it or whatever. Just just for just conversation wise, man. I started off to do the Wimbledon massacre yesterday. I didn't have no intentions on continuing it with the other cities that I implemented within the last video, and I damn sure didn't want to talk about Francis Scott Keys. All right. So I'm gonna make another third part of this. I'm gonna rock this on out to a little bit after 7. And I will be going further back in with it, all right. So let's get with this, man. All right. Let's touch on this Francis Scott Keys guy, man. Cause the fucked up part about it is this, right? And I want y'all to know this, right? Everything that they make you do is shit that went against the Aborigines of this country. All right. So when I last touched off, we was talking about this chick, Anna Marie Thornton or whatever, and basically it was saying about Nat Turner, and it was talking about basically so Francis Scott Keys was a lawyer who was put into a political who was put into politics basically, right? And what basically happened was Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was a motherfucking devil, straight devil. I mean, and like I said, I apply that word to people who may really don't deserve to be called the devil, but Andrew Jackson was a fucking devil, y'all. And we're gonna go into this, all right? And like I said, I'm gonna make a third part to this because I'm gonna rock this on out for about 40 more minutes. Excuse me, for about 40 minutes, and we're gonna come to the conclusion. When I come back from the gym, we're gonna conclude this, all right? All right, let me see how many people we got up in here, man. I got 16 viewers. Nah, we'll wait till we get about 20, man. I don't, maybe people don't want to watch this type of information, man. But I'll tell you one thing. When it comes to your history and pretty much what the hell is going on, like, yeah, I guess normally I pick up viewers a little faster than this. You know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna go in with it. We're gonna rock with the 15. We're gonna rock with it. Let's go. All right, so it say the change in racial composition of the city fled those fears. During 1830, free blacks who outnumbered slaves in Washington for the first time, entrepreneurs of colors were running restaurants, driving horse-drawn taxis. Let me take this guy. All right, driving horse-drawn taxis and working as government messengers. Let me turn this fucking TV off too, y'all. All right, hold up. Give me a second. Let me turn this TV down. Hold up. All right, we back. All right, say working as government messengers to make matters even tense. The capital was awash that week. It say with rumors of abolished peril. It say petitioners from up north were demanding the Congress abolish the slave trade in the federal district. In an earlier version of the political direct mail campaign, abolitionists began sending those publications bursting with illustration stories of slavery cruelty to the presidents, to the congressmen and professors and other leading citizens. To open circulation of such stories struck many white people and even more than a few Negroes as a challenge to the law and order of the communities and incitement to the slave to slaughter their masters. All right. So it said the prominence of the victim made the story all the more sensation. At 60 years of age, Anna was among the best known ladies in Washington. Her mother, Ann Burder, had been an accomplished school teacher who had moved from England to Philadelphia. When Anna was a baby, a renowned beauty in her youth. It's a Anna who had married at age 15 to William Thornton, a brilliant architect. It's a who was a friendly term with George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and other leaders. Remember, all the motherfuckers owned slaves. It's saying other leaders. It's saying a new nation after William Thornton. It's say won the 1792 contest to design the capital. Saying his wife moved to Washington, where they became fixtures of the town's elite. Now remember, we know how most of these Europeans got over here. They came here despite the fact that the Aborigines did not want them here. You know, we had friends. We made friends with some of these Europeans, but for the most part, most of the Europeans forced themselves upon this land. All right. And then the ones that, like most of the Aborigines who didn't agree with them, they warred with us, they enslaved us, and however you want to put it. All right. In 1804, Anna sat for her friend Gilbert Schwartz, the painter who made his name portraying George Washington. Schwartz portrait of her revealing a handsome, proud woman with a strange nose and bright eyes. Say outward indicators of quick perception, womanly grace, and determination. She and her husband had no children. She devoted herself to the household economy, throwing dinner parties, hosting out of town visitors, and managing the family from the bastard. It's say in affairs of business. She was equal to a man. They say a friend later recalled. They say now Anna was distraught at Arthur's arrest and no doubt regretful of her role in bringing it about. They say, "Oh, I grieve indeed at this business." Anna wrote in her diary that Saturday night, "The people are incensed against Arthur as he is thought to be one of a party instigator." They say by some white friends to rise an insurrection. Oh God, protect us. So still as thou has done, and give me fortitude and resolution. They say before her prayer could be answered, a crowd of angry white men gathered around the city jail and Judiciary Square that weekend. They were mostly Irish, mostly drunk. See, more immigrants, known as mechanics. They say these manual laborers were poor, insecure, and the institution of slavery with its low-cost labor. Now remember, Irish was some fucking peasants, man. And they, and see how they paint story, all whites, all this shit go together, man. And most of the time when you hear, because they tell you that the Irish did not become white, the Irish and Italian did not become part of the so-called white community until the 1940s, just so they can add the numbers dealing with white degeneracy. All right. So when we read this, you have to pretty much read it from the inside. We reading it more right now just for more educational purposes. But when you really start to understand, some of this stuff is going to be a little off, because we know that the Irish was not really accepted into European society. All right. They called the Irish niggas too. All right. All right. So let's keep it moving. All right. And say, but they did not direct their rage at the slave master. They turned on the Negroes and the abolitionists, seeing them to dire threats to be repelled. Watching the tumult, it's in Judicial Square, was a free Negro named Michael Schreiner. It say who worked for the Navy and kept a diary. The mechanic, he wrote, swore they would pull the jail down, and they continue making their threats. And they said their objects was to get Miss Thornton mulatto and hang him without judge or jury. Okay. It's a district attorney Keys. District Attorney Keys, we know who this devil is, Francis Keys, it say struggled to restore order. At 56, he was in a Perley word, a small active man having an earnest and anxious countenance, as if care sat heavily upon him, accustomed, they say, to leading his family in prayer twice a day. Keys was not prepared for a defiant mob shouting obscenities. It say, and all he had to protect himself was a city property, the city police force, which consisted of exactly 10 constables. 10 constables, remember that. They say, so according to the newspaper, according to Keys, asked for military help, and a detachment of Marines, a detachment of Marines was sent from the naval yards. By nightfall, scores of Marines carrying bayoneted guns marched down Pennsylvania Avenue towards the Judiciary Square, where the clamoring mechanics were temporarily cowed but not claimed. Keys apparently thought he had to do more. He shared the globe view that Arthur Bowen alleged attack was the first fruit of the circulation of the abolish. It's a literature. This is not the modern day view of Keys. It's a on historical markers in Francis Keys Park in Georgetown. He is described as an active in anti-slavery causes. Now we're going to touch on that. Before I even get off this page, we're going to talk. Matter of fact, when I get off this page, we're going to go right into the next article, because it's a couple more pages to this. All right. So it say that technically accurate, but hardly the whole story. Keys was an active leader in American colonization society. Now remember, American colonization society. Okay, we know what the American colonization society did it to us in the 1910s. Okay, they was responsible for classifying us as Negro in color. It's a group of popular among the right-thinking members of the capital elite, which while repugnating it's a slavery in principle, also sought to encourage Negroes to move to Africa. Now look at that. Also sought to encourage Negroes to move to Africa. Now the American Colonization Society, remember that. All right. It's also encouraging Negroes to move to Africa. Now we know that these people, when they went over there and started, this is the reason when you start getting what's this guy, man? I always forget his name, man. Henry Acquesson. Or when you start getting these jokers who started pushing the whole move to Iberia and move to Sierra Leone. This was as a result to the American Colonization Society. All right. So it's saying, let me get it out. The city's legal sanctioned slave trade did not stir Keys to action. He was far more offended by the outside and agitation. I'm my bad. I can't get that word out. It say for the North who sought to be the abolish it. It say on August 10th, Keys persuaded a justice of the peace to write a warrant for the arrest of one Reuben Condrell. It's a white man who was said to be in possession of an abolitionist literature. Crandall was a 29-year-old botanist. Botanist. And doctor from New York who had recently opened an office on High Street, now Wisconsin Avenue in Georgetown. Crandall was a plausible suspect because of his notorious sister Prudence Crandall. She was a Connecticut school teacher who had stirred controversy nationwide the year before by welcoming a free Negro girl into her classroom. The Connecticut legislature promptly passed the law forbidding the integrated schools. According to the newspaper, according Reuben Candro, it say cut a soldierer, I guess that's soldierer, it's a figure than his outspoken sister. It say he opposed slavery, but not openly. It say as a teetotaler, it say he cared more about the prohibition of liquor than the abolition of slavery. Let me go on a little further with this. I say when the two constables went to Condro office, he allowed them to search the premises. Say as they later testified in court, constables found a box full of copies of anti-slavery reports and the liberators. It say in two publications that had been mass mailed to the city leading citizen. Candro was arrested on charges of sedition as the constables emerged on the streets with their prisoners. One bystander, it say later testified that someone in the crowd had said, "We ought to take the damn rascal and hang him up." It say hang him up on one of the trees. The constable rushed Condor into the jail judicial square for his own safety, but with the two prisoners that they loaf in custody. It say the mechanics grew more agitated. It say and refused to disappear. All right. It say the public indignation of the rising high. It say the public indignation is rising high. It say, and the general impression is that the culprit will not go unpunished. One visitor wrote, Candrew arrest the dozen of Marines garrisoned around City Hall and the jail. It say, however, meant the mob could not lynch either Bowen or Candor. It say so soon the mechanic turned their fury on the new target, Beverly Snow. All right, Beverly Snow. It say a free man of mixed race, say who ran a popular restaurant at the corner of 6th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue. The air the Epicurean eating house. A rumor spread that Snow had, in the words of the Washington Mirror, used very indecent and disrespectful language concerning the wives and daughters of the mechanics. Now you can just see that. Now you could just say something bad at that point in time, and you could be convicted of something. See that shit? All right, it say Snow at his name might imply was a cool customer. It say who seemed to blend in with whites. It say he finally appointed restaurant. It finally appointed restaurant sat amid several busy hotels on Pennsylvania Avenue. By day, Snow served Washington better white families. They say at night he often parlors for the gentlemen, forming private parties. The newspaper advertisements that he ran that weekly declared that his menu included a fine green turnip. It's a very fine shepherd head. Ew, that's not a shepherd head. They be eating shepherd heads now. It's saying every other luxury of the season. So that was a luxury to eat a fucking shepherd head. It say as the mob descended on his restaurant on August 11th, Snow, in the words of one account, escaped unharmed through the management of white friends. All right, now let me go to the next page. I know this is probably a little boring, y'all, but I wanted to just get with this Francis Scott Key shit or whatever. Let me see something real quick. All right. All right, look, before I go on there, we're gonna go in here. Let me see something real quick. Was it this page? Let me see something. My bad, y'all. Hold up. No, it is this page, y'all. Let me go back here. Let me go back out, y'all. It ain't let me get it. All right, here we go. Just I wanted to read this in between. All right. Scott Keys owned slaves. All right. Now, anybody who was rubbing elbows when Andrew Jackson was a damn. All right. So let me go back to that. All right. The second sentence of Mr. 3rd, August 21st, local when enslaved people sued Georgetown founder for freedom. It say was misleading. It say as an aspiring lawyer at 30s, Francis Scott Keys was known as an evangelical Episcopalian. I haven't fucking pronounced that word. It say who considered slavery inhumane. It say and the slave trade and outright evil. It say but slaves. He used his legal skills to attack any anti-abolitionist. It's a movement. Keys also represented slave owners who were trying to recapture their escaped slaves. Keys did not provide legal services to some slaves fighting for their freedom. Hold up. All right, the commentary was very informative, but the aforementioned must be mentioned or the reader may walk away believing Keys' faith prevented him from being a part of the benefiting from the enslavement of blacks. Neither Keys' faith nor the Jesuits' faith prevented the enslavement of human beings, aka their property. All right. Now here go another part right here. I wanted to read. Hey, that article I was reading, that shit is pretty long. I'm gonna have to come back to that. All right, so and I know a lot of people that did research on this motherfucker since the whole Kaepernick and all that shit had happened or whatever. But you know, like when I was reading this, it kind of led me to this. I wanted to kind of touch on this, being as though I never really touched on it, and I didn't properly educate myself. So I mean, for those of y'all who don't know, we can learn together, man. Because I don't know everything. Like I said, and I'm learning. Sometimes I'll be reading this stuff. I'll be learning too as I go along, man. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, a lot of history in this country, man, it's a bunch of demons, man. Like I say, everybody around here, oh, Donald Trump is the worst. Nah. You think Donald Trump was the worst? You think he the worst? He ain't no worse than none of these other motherfuckers. You understand? Andrew Jackson probably was the worst president that I have read about since I've been educated, since I've been on some form of education. Andrew Jackson. And there's a lot of other presidents leading after that who was just as demonic as him. All right. They say, do you know the Star-Spangled Banner 3rd verse? All right. Now, remember, this is the 4th of July. All right. Let me see something. Let me just see how long this shit is before I embark into it. It's not that long. All right. Here we go. Let me open up a little bit too. All right, here you go. All right, this 4th of July, here's an American story most of us were never taught. After we had brutally enslaved Aboriginal people for most 200 years, some escaped and joined the British Army to fight the American, which the Americans was the motherfucking Aborigines. See how they try to throw that word around, try to apply the word American to Europeans? Nah, colonists, all right, European immigrants. It say in the War of 1812, say they were called the colonial marines, the colonial Marines, the colonial Moorings. It say why join the British to get freedom. Remember, blacks had been enslaved in America since 1619, which that's a lie. We know that's not true. It say and freedom was not now here in sight. All right. Saying in August of 1814, the colonial Marines were part of the British troops that attacked American outside of DC and drove them back into the city, setting the White House on fire. Remember, setting the White House on fire, okay? It say one of the Americans who witnessed it was Francis Scott Keyes. It's saying September Keyes also witnessed 25 hours of continuous British bombardment of Fort McHenry. It say in Baltimore. Now remember, this is the attack on Fort McHenry. Y'all got to check that out. Definitely do some research on that. It say after that's when they burnt down the White House. It say after seeing the White House burnt. It say and the fort survived. Keyes became so moved that he wrote a poem that became the national anthem. In the third verse, Keyes had a special message for enslaved people. It say who have dared to fight for their freedom. We will pursue you to get revenge. Okay. Now we just read some stuff on her. Check this shit out. We will pursue you to get revenge. No refuge could save the heroine enslaved from the terror of flight or gloom of grave, and the Star-Spangled Banner and the triumph doth wave. It say, or and of the free and the home of the brave, or the land of the free and the home of the slave. All right. His message to blacks fighting for their freedom was unmistakable. We will hunt you down and the search will leave you in terror. It say because when we find you, we will not stop. No, the next stop is the gloom of the grave. Some people try to claim he was writing about some other group of slaves. It say, but there is no historical evidence that slaves refer to anyone other than black enslaved people, whom Keyes viewed as a district of inferior people, a race of people. It say which experience proved to be the greatest evil that afflicts the community. As a prosecutor in D.C., Keyes sought the death penalty for a man who possessed the abolitionist literature. Keyes, that's what we're reading about. We're reading about that's dealing with the Snow Riot. All right. It say Keyes believed that anyone considered abolishing slaves was willing to associate, amalgamate, associated and amalgamate with the Negroes, and to him that justified execution. All right. Let me see. All right. This story, this is the story of Francis Scott Keyes and the writing of the poem that became the national anthem. As you celebrate Independence Day, it say, ask yourself if an American, if you celebrate Independence Day, ask yourself if, as Americans, we have, y'all not Americans, you're United States citizens. Y'all have the courage to admit when something is really wrong with one of y'all traditions. Okay, that's not my tradition. Francis Scott Keyes and the shit he did to my ancestors, that's not a tradition. That's a travesty. All right. It say the truth is not always pleasant. It say, but it is always the truth. All right. It say on June 19, 2008, the cultural project of Center Productions of Liberated People brought Jeffrey Robinson renowned talk on the history of racism to New York State. It say these videos are part of whom, I guess that's the video right here or whatever though. But man, y'all pretty much see how this shit is. And And most people don't even know this stuff, man. So I'm gonna go back here. I'm gonna go back here, right here. When I come back from the gym, y'all, I'm gonna finish it off. If y'all would like me to finish it off or whatever, cause I got about 3 more pages. I want to read the rest of it though. But if not, you guys check it out. The Snow Riots or whatever of DC or whatever. We went over the eight so-called successful riots, the 8 so-called successful and thriving black communities destroyed by by racism, by racist whites neighbors. All right, so we went over these or whatever, and like I said, in learning about them, I've stumbled along the Snow Riot. All right, which led me back to this double Francis Keys. All right, so now you know why, when come football season, they making them stand for that shit. And that's for anybody who watch football. I'm like I said, I'm not a fucking football watcher like that. Yeah, the shit be on or whatever, but it's not nothing where I'm gonna be sitting there with a bunch of grown ass men like, yeah, and drinking beer and all that goofy shit. Nah, I don't have to watch it at all. I don't get it wrong. I love basketball. I play football, but I ain't gotta watch football like that. And like I said, I don't stand for the national anthem now. I would not stand for that shit, especially knowing the history of this country and knowing that all these people that they want you to praise are all racist. That's why when you look at that picture, the emblem of America, that European is having us is trying to make us conform to all. I think it's Thomas Jefferson, that's Columbus, George Washington, Christopher Columbus, Sir Francis Drake. And I believe it's one more other person on the emblem of America that they trying to make you conform to. But for the most part, man, like I said, man, y'all do y'all history on this stuff so you can better educate yourself, man. So we don't just be going along to get along, man. Because you got a lot of black people who, because they so-called successful, fall for anything. And they just go along and get along, man. And I see coons all day, every day, man. And I just be looking like, damn, bro, you supposed to be educated. You don't know shit. You know what I'm saying? So, like I said, man, when I come back from the gym, I'm gonna finish it up. If I do not finish this up, y'all read the rest of it. I would at least try to reach out to the brothers, see if we can do the encyclopedia, because I done had the encyclopedia up here for a couple days, and I wanted to start on P's. Actually, we on P right now. I wanted to finish the P's out because P's is very long and very informative. So, you know what I'm saying? Hopefully I can come back on that. I just wanted to just touch on that, man. You know what I'm saying? This was a lightweight joint. It was heavyweight in the content of knowing that you should not be standing for that motherfucking national anthem. You shouldn't be pledging no allegiance or none of that goofy shit, man. You know what I'm saying? I don't do none of that shit. When I be in court, like it's like yesterday, me and my daughter, we was in court. And they was like, all rise. I told my daughter, I said, sit down. We ain't rising for them. It's our honor to be here. It's not their honor to have us here. So for you agents that's listening, yeah, the Thompsonist one, that's how I get down or whatever. I don't stand for your motherfucking national anthems. I don't celebrate your and that's it. And I'm not pledging allegiance to a bunch of people who then came here and colonized us and made me lose my tradition. Man, it's your boy the Thompsonist one. And hopefully when I go to the gym, I'm gonna reach out to the brothers that I need to be in contact with, so we can finish the encyclopedia or whatever. But for the most part, man, yeah, that's it, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm out of here. Peace.